Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. And you might want to buckle up for this one because this one is truly bizarre.
It is, yeah.
We are talking about a lake in Hampshire, England. A lake that vanishes.
A vanishing lake.
It doesn't slowly dry up like you think of a drought or something. It just straight up disappears.
Yeah, it's almost like someone hit the drain button on like a colossal bathtub.
Right.
Reports suggest that it happens suddenly.
Wow.
Like one day there's this beautiful lake shimmering in the sunlight, and the next day it's just a dry basin.
Okay, that's already pretty creepy. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh boy.
The official explanations that are out there are super vague.
Oh, really?
Like they mention things like sinkholes or underground shifts. But honestly, the lack of clear information is almost more suspicious, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's like this vacuum of knowledge, and when there's a vacuum like that, all these conspiracy theories rush in to fill it. It's human nature when something this strange happens and the authorities are so tight-lipped, people can't help but start connecting their own dots.
And in this case, those dots lead to some pretty wild places.
Right.
So for this deep dive, we're going full conspiracy mode.
All right, love it.
We're going to forget logic, forget science for now, and we're diving headfirst into the weirdest theories about the vanishing lake of Hampshire.
Sounds like fun.
So let's start with what we know, or rather what we don't know. This lake, it's not on any official maps. It's
Yeah.
almost like it's been intentionally erased.
It really does give off that vibe, doesn't it?
Okay, hold on. This is straight out of like a mystery novel.
Yeah.
You're telling me there's this hidden lake in the English countryside that comes and goes as it pleases, and no one wants to talk about it.
Pretty much, yeah. And the source material mentions that only locals seem to even know about it. It's like this whispered legend passed down through generations.
Dude, we've got secrecy, we've got a disappearing lake. Is anyone else getting government cover-up vibes here?
Oh, absolutely. And, the most popular theory circulating online is that there's a secret government facility hidden beneath the lake.
Okay, wait, hold on. A hidden facility like an underground lair?
Exactly.
What kind of Bond villain stuff are we talking about here?
Right, but it's so intriguing. Think about a lake that conveniently disappears. Maybe it's not natural at all. Maybe it's a way to control access to something below the surface.
Okay, I'm trying to keep an open mind here.
Yeah.
I really am. But I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this. Let's say, hypothetically, there is a secret base under this lake. What in the world would the government be doing down there?
That's where things get really interesting. The source mentions all sorts of possibilities, each more outlandish than the last.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, we're talking weapons testing, top secret scientific experiments. Some even speculate it's something far stranger than we can imagine.
Stranger what? Like alien autopsies? Cloning labs?
Hey, I'm just laying out the theories here. Remember, we're embracing the conspiracy mindset for this deep dive.
Okay.
No idea is too crazy at this point.
All right, fair enough. So we've got secret weapons, mad scientists, and maybe even some extraterrestrial shenanigans.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
This is getting good, but let's be real here for a second. Is there any actual evidence to support this wild theory?
Well, that's the thing about conspiracy theories, isn't it? They thrive on a lack of evidence. The absence of proof somehow becomes proof itself.
Right.
It's all about connecting the dots, even if those dots are pretty far apart.
Okay, so no concrete proof, just a lot of speculation and what ifs.
Exactly.
But, that doesn't make it any less fun to think about, right?
Not at all. And even if it turns out to be completely bogus, it's still fascinating to explore the psychology behind these beliefs.
Oh, yeah.
Why are we so drawn to the idea of secret societies and hidden agendas? What is it about the unknown that captures our imaginations?
Yeah, it's like we can't resist a good mystery, especially one with a dash of government conspiracy.
Well, a little bit of paranoia always spices things up.
But as much as I love a good dose of paranoia myself, I think it's time to bring in a little bit of logic here. What about the science? Could there be a natural explanation for this vanishing act?
There could be. The source material does acknowledge that our understanding of geology, particularly in remote areas like this, is still evolving.
So are we talking sinkholes, underground rivers? What kind of geological magic could make a whole lake disappear?
Well, there are actually quite a few possibilities. Think about underground aquifers, for example.
Okay.
These vast reservoirs of water beneath the surface.
I vaguely remember learning about those in school, something about water tables and permeable rock.
Exactly. Those aquifers can fluctuate sometimes dramatically depending on rainfall, geological shifts, even human activity.
Oh, wow.
So it's conceivable that the lake is somehow connected to one of these aquifers, and when the water level drops, so does the lake.
Okay, that's actually pretty interesting. So we've got these massive underground water systems potentially shifting and changing, and our vanishing lake might just be a side effect of that.
It's certainly a possibility, and there are other geological phenomena that could be at play as well. Sinkholes, for example.
Oh, right.
They can form suddenly and dramatically, swallowing up anything above them.
I've seen those videos online where like a car just disappears into the ground. It's terrifying, but also kind of cool.
Right, and while it's probably less common for an entire lake to vanish into a sinkhole, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility.
So we've got secret government bases, we've got giant underground aquifers, we've got the potential for sudden and dramatic sinkholes.
It's a lot to consider.
This is getting complicated. How do we even begin to sort through all these theories and figure out what's really going on? Where do we go from here?
Well, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's not forget about the human element. Local lore, while often dismissed as just folklore, might hold valuable clues.
You're talking about those whispered legends we mentioned earlier, the ones that have been passed down through generations. But isn't that how myths and legends are born, like embellishing real events until they become these fantastical tales?
That's true, but even myths often contain kernels of truth. Perhaps there's a historical basis for these stories, a real phenomenon that's been distorted over time. You know, like a game of telephone.
Okay, so maybe those local stories aren't entirely useless, but how do we separate fact from fiction? How do we know which details are genuine and which ones are just embellishments?
That's where critical analysis comes in. We need to look for patterns in the stories, for details that are consistently reported, even if the interpretations vary.
So if multiple people from different generations mention strange lights or sounds before the lake vanishes, that might be worth investigating further.
Exactly. It's about looking for those recurring motifs, those elements that transcend individual storytelling and hint at a deeper truth.
All right, so we're diving into local lore, we're scrutinizing eyewitness accounts. This is feeling more and more like a real investigation.
Getting exciting, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
But we need to be careful not to get carried away, right? Just because something is unexplained doesn't automatically mean it's a conspiracy or a supernatural event.
Absolutely. It's important to maintain a healthy dose of skepticism. The most logical explanation is often the correct one.
But sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, right?
That's what keeps things interesting, and with a mystery like this, who knows what we might uncover?
I can't wait to find out. All right, we'll be back after the break to delve even deeper into this vanishing lake mystery, so don't go anywhere.
Like, imagine you're sifting through all these local tales and you find recurring mentions of like swirling mists before the lake vanishes.
Oh, wow.
Or like tremors felt in the ground. Those details, however strange they might be the keys to unlocking this whole thing.
Yeah, it's like we're piecing together this puzzle, right?
Exactly.
And some pieces are scientific data, others are historical records, and then you got these odd-shaped pieces of folklore that might just complete the picture.
And who knows, maybe those outlandish theories about secret bases, maybe those are just our modern way of trying to explain something that's ancient and equally baffling.
Right.
We've always been drawn to the unexplained, haven't we?
Okay, I am starting to get hooked on this whole mystery. It's got real-world strangeness, but mixed with the potential for something truly extraordinary.
That's the allure of the unknown, isn't it? It compels us to seek answers, even if those answers lead us down some pretty unexpected paths.
So where do we go from here? How do we actually investigate a disappearing lake? Do we just camp out and wait for it to vanish?
Well, the source material outlines a few avenues we could explore. It suggests starting with a thorough geological survey of the area.
Okay, so get some scientists out there with their ground-penetrating radar and all their fancy equipment.
Exactly. We need to map the underlying geology, analyze the soil composition, understand the water systems in the area. Are there underground caves or caverns? Is the lake bed particularly porous? Things like that.
And I'm guessing studying the water table would be crucial too, right?
Absolutely. We need to understand how the water levels fluctuate, not just in the lake itself, but also in the surrounding area. Are there any unusual patterns or anomalies?
And I imagine historical records could shed some light on this as well. Have there been documented disappearances in the past? Is there any sort of pattern or timeline we can discern?
Precisely, if we can establish a historical record of these vanishings, we might be able to correlate them with other events like periods of heavy rainfall or seismic activity, just to see if there's any connection.
Okay, so we've got geological surveys, water table analysis, and historical research. That's a pretty solid starting point for any investigation. But what about those eyewitness accounts? How do we factor those into the equation?
Eyewitness accounts are always tricky, especially when we're dealing with something as unusual and potentially frightening as a disappearing lake.
Right, because people's memories can be unreliable, emotions can distort perceptions.
Exactly, but we can't dismiss them entirely. The key is to analyze them critically, looking for consistent details, patterns, and corroboration.
So if multiple witnesses mention seeing the same strange lights or hearing similar sounds, that adds a level of credibility.
Precisely, it suggests that there's something more to these accounts than just imagination or misperception.
Okay, so we're not just collecting stories, we're treating them as pieces of evidence, analyzing them for recurring themes and patterns. This is starting to feel like a real detective story.
It is. It's like we're on the case of the Vanishing Lake.
But even with all this research and analysis, is there a guarantee that we'll actually solve the mystery of the Vanishing Lake?
Well, there's never a guarantee in any investigation, especially one as unusual as this.
So we could do all this work and still end up scratching our heads.
It's possible, but even if we don't find a definitive answer, the journey of exploration, the process of investigating and analyzing, that's where the real value lies.
I like that perspective.
Yeah.
It's not just about finding the answer, it's about the pursuit of knowledge, the thrill of the chase.
Exactly.
And who knows, maybe the act of searching will lead us to discoveries we never anticipated.
Exactly. The Vanishing Lake. It's a reminder that the world is still full of mysteries.
It really is.
And those mysteries, they invite us to explore, to question, and to push the boundaries of our understanding.
And sometimes the most intriguing mysteries are the ones that remain unsolved, right?
They certainly spark our imaginations and keep us coming back for more. They remind us that there's still so much we don't know about the world, and that's a pretty exciting thought.
It is. So, for all our listeners out there who are now completely fascinated by this Vanishing Lake, we want to hear from you.
Do you have any theories of your own?
Have you ever encountered a local legend or unexplained phenomenon that just left you wondering?
Share your thoughts, your experiences, your wildest speculations with us. We might not have all the answers, but we can explore the possibilities together.
Because that's what this deep dive is all about, embracing the mystery, seeking the truth, and never losing our sense of wonder. It's funny, we started this whole deep dive like focusing on the conspiracy theories,
Right.
But we've ended up talking about geology and history and folklore. Like, this mystery has so many layers to peel back.
It really does. It's a perfect example of how complex and interconnected our world is. You can't just look at a phenomenon in isolation. You have to consider all the factors that might be at play.
And sometimes those factors lead you in some pretty unexpected directions. Who have thought we'd be discussing like underground aquifers and the power of storytelling while trying to figure out why a lake disappears.
It's all part of the adventure, right?
It is, but it's about embracing the intellectual adventure, even if it means venturing outside our comfort zones. And in this case, that comfort zone is a very dry lake bed in Hampshire.
Which reminds me, we haven't even touched upon the impact this Vanishing Lake has on the local community.
Oh, right.
Imagine, living near a lake that could just disappear at any moment. That would have to affect everything.
Oh, yeah.
Property values, local tourism, you name it.
Not to mention the potential ecological consequences, right? What happens to the wildlife that depends on that lake? How does the surrounding ecosystem adapt to such drastic changes?
That's a huge question.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these mysteries aren't just like abstract puzzles to solve, they have real-world implications for the people and the environment.
And those implications are often intertwined with the mystery itself, making the search for answers even more crucial.
So before we wrap up, I have to ask, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this deep dive into the Vanishing Lake of Hampshire?
That's a good question. I'd say it's the importance of curiosity, of never taking things at face value, and always being willing to explore multiple perspectives, whether it's a vanishing lake or any other unexplained phenomenon. There's always more to the story than meets the eye.
Well said. And who knows, maybe one of our listeners out there holds the key to solving this mystery. Maybe they have a piece of local lore, a scientific insight, or a personal experience that could shed new light on this vanishing act.
That would be amazing. So if you're out there and you've got something to share, don't be shy. Head over to our website or social media and let us know your thoughts.
We're always eager to hear from our fellow deep divers. And we believe that the best insights often come from the most unexpected places.
It's true.
So keep those minds open, those imaginations active, and those questions coming. Because in a world full of mysteries, the search for answers is what keeps us going.
That's a great note to end on.
It is. That's it for this episode of Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride into the heart of the unknown. Until next time, keep exploring.